on another Matich Monday. Joining us now over Zoom is ESPN College Football insider and expert, fresh off a very busy weekend of work in his ESPN studios. Trevor Matich back to discuss just how in the world BYU survived Oklahoma State and got to 7-0, because it was one of those moments, Trevor, when BYU had a 0.8% chance to win on 4th and 7 deep in their own territory with under a minute to play, and they pull it off. How, in your opinion, did BYU make this happen?
It's hard to explain, really. I mean, you could say they pulled it off because they believed they could. They pulled it off because they had the talent to do it. They pulled it off because they kept on punching away, and all those things are true. But there comes a point where all of those things come together in a moment, and you can't really explain it just with data, just with facts. It is a thing that players feel on the sideline, that coaches feel on the sideline, that gets onto the field. And BYU has had several of those moments over the course of this season, and this was one of them. It was amazing. I mean, there was a lot of despair in that stadium when they were down 4 points with a minute to go, just over a minute to go, and they had struggled on offense at times, and the next thing you know, bang, bang, and they score the game-winning touchdown. And when you try to analyze it, you can say, okay, well, this play worked because of this, and that play worked because of that. But when it comes down to it, it was one of those synergies of everything that comes together when a team has things going for them.
I love that it was a different way, too. We talked about that the last couple of weeks. There's going to be a game where BYU loses the margin or the defense struggles, offense got to win it or whatnot. This was that game, -1 in margin. Defense gave up a bunch of yards and points. We hadn't seen that before. Now BYU has to have a game-winning drive with under a minute 30 left. And wow, Jake Retzloff to Chase Roberts on 4th down. The 27-yard run by Jake Retzloff. Darius Lassiter makes people look like fools, breaking ankles, getting into the end zone. What impressed you the most about how BYU won this game?
That game-winning drive that you're talking about, what impressed me the most about that was clock management. Right? The least sizzle of everything that you described, all those great plays, all those great moments, clock management. They're down 4, they're 75 yards away, and they ran 8 plays in the space of just over a minute. 8 plays in just over a minute, and they hit that game winner. And that, to me, was the most important thing, because we talked about all the things that Jake Retzloff has done for this team this year with his arm, with his legs, with his leadership. Managing that drive tells you something else about Jake, that the art of quarterbacking is advancing in him, that he's not just a guy that can sling the ball, sidearm anywhere on the field. He can take off and run. He can do all those things. He can play quarterback, and that's important because you've got a long legacy of great quarterbacking, not just great throwers, great quarterbacks. And the art of quarterbacking includes seeing how much time you have left, seeing what you need to do, and then managing what you need to do within the time that you have. And 8 plays in just over a minute, to me, was magnificent.
It's Matich Monday on BYU Sports Nation with ESPN's Trevor Matich. Trevor, there's this growing idea that BYU is, quote-unquote, lucky, that the bounces are just going their way. Now you compare that to BYU needing to make plays, specifically on that last drive and all throughout the season. So where do you stand in that conversation of BYU's just a lucky team versus they've earned all of this?
I think both are true. They have had some bounces go their way. They've had some tip balls go their way. But at the same time, if it happens in one game, you maybe you're lucky. If it happens in 2 or 3, maybe you're really lucky. But if it keeps happening over and over again, maybe you're good at it. And this is where I think BYU has developed that knack, for lack of a better word, of taking advantage of those bounces. Because when the ball bounces in their favor, you still have to take advantage of it. You still have to make it work. And I think that last drive against Oklahoma State is part of it. There was nothing really that went their way on that. They had to take everything that they got on that drive to score the game winner. And so I think that's something that you also have to take into account. But also, things going their way, opponents making mistakes, opponents making a key turnover or penalty at a critical moment, those are things that have also benefited BYU. And so they've got to continue to improve as a team in order to be able to enforce their will even when the opponent doesn't make some of those mistakes. Now, does that mean that BYU is lucky? I'm not saying that at all. I think BYU is opportunistic. BYU has been able to enforce its will in multiple ways on defense, on offense, on special teams. But at the same time, as they continue to improve, then I think people won't tend to think that, well, gee, they needed that lucky bounce in order to win, even though I don't think they did.
The Roman philosopher Seneca said, luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. So I guess BYU's lucky in that way. They prepare and they get the opportunity and they take it away. They seize the moment. How about the run game, Trev? 7.1 yards per carry. LJ Martin has his first 100-yard game. He's a touchdown scoring machine right now, 2 in 3 of the 4 games he's had this year. What do you see from the run game and this BYU offensive line that is playing 2 different starters, including Bruce Mitchell at center?
Now, the run game has been phenomenal. I mean, we knew this was a good offensive line with the potential to be one of the best offensive lines in recent years at BYU. And it didn't really show up in the stats so much early in the season when Hinckley Rapati and LJ Martin were injured. The backups that came in, the 3rd and 4th and 5th running backs, they kept things going. They kept winning games. Everything worked out. But the offensive line, I think, wasn't getting the credit that they deserved. Now, all of a sudden, you've got LJ and Hinckley back. And you could see how they work together so well. I mean, LJ averaged 6 yards a carry, Hinckley about 8 yards per carry, and that opens up everything else. And it makes it easier to break down defenses with a mobile quarterback because you've got that foundation of that pounding run. And then they'll make a statement with it. I mean, it was their first drive of the second half? They had a touchdown drive where they ran the ball every single play. Every single play was a run. And to me, I was thinking not of the O-line or the running backs at that moment. I was thinking of Coach Satake, who's an old fullback at BYU. And he's one of the most passionate coaches, one of the most, how do I say this without, he's got that instinct to drive the opponent into the ground and then hug him after the game and love him up. But during the game, you don't want to stand in front of Kalani Satake at all. And when they were doing that, a touchdown drive with nothing but runs, I was thinking this is a reflection of their head coach. And I loved it. But they had most of the O-line together. They had the running backs back together. And then Bruce Mitchell at center, did a magnificent job. I mean, he was fantastic all game long. And it all came together, and it was a great performance.
Trevor Matich on BYU Sports Nation. The Cougar offense, of course, doing enough and delivering late. The BYU defense left some things to be desired, and I say that really for the first time all season. Oklahoma State's run game and Ollie Gordon II, all of a sudden he looked like the reigning Doak Walker Award winner that we expected him to be. And their offensive line looked like what we expected them to be, but it was to BYU's frustration. So, Trevor, what concerns do you have moving forward, knowing that BYU is going to face one of the best, if not the best, rushing attack in the entire country when they face UCF this Saturday?
Well, it is a concern, and you have to start by giving credit to Oklahoma State. You know, we talked last week about how they last year played in the Big 12 championship game. They brought back an All-American running back in Ollie Gordon. They brought back an experienced offensive line, an experienced quarterback. They hadn't put it together this year, but they had a bye week coming into the BYU game to put it together, and boy, did they with that running game. And that's a problem. And when you look at part of the reason why was not just Oklahoma State, but it was BYU also on defense, got over-aggressive sometimes. And they lost contain more often than they should have. They had guys going after the ball instead of staying in their gap. And that allowed for some breakout runs by Oklahoma State. Now, I want to be careful about that because the last thing you want to do with this BYU defense is take away their aggressiveness. You don't want to say, no, don't be aggressive, because sometimes you'll end up out of your lane. No, part of the reason they're undefeated, a big reason why they're undefeated, is that BYU's defense goes after the opponent. They show up where they're not expected really fast, and they end up taking the ball away. And these are things that make them great this year. But they bit them a little bit against Oklahoma State. So what they'll need to do against UCF is maintain that aggression, but have more mindfulness of making sure that they're in their gap and don't allow those breakouts. I mean, some of those key runs for Oklahoma State were out wide, and normally you would want to see a contained guy either being blocked out there or a contained guy getting beat out there by a great move, because the other side's good too. Sometimes you'll just get beat, or sometimes the block will work. But there were times when it's like, okay, where's the contained guy? And you had trouble identifying where he was. So these are things that BYU's defense can get better at, but they need to get better at those things while not losing that ability to get into the backfield and attack the football, especially against a team like UCF, because you don't want to let their downhill running game get started on you. You want to stop them in the backfield. You just have to do it in your own lane.
Certainly have to get that done. 14 big plays in this game. First time BYU's given up 30-plus, 400 yards. Now you play UCF on a two-time zone away game in the afternoon. A team that rushes for 1,000,000 yards, who nearly beat Iowa State. Probably should have won that game, Trevor. BYU a favorite, but not by much. What do you make of this matchup as BYU tries to go for 8-0?
This is a tough matchup. I mean, they're, like you guys have mentioned, they're third in the nation in rushing. They run a majority of the time. They just come downhill at you, and it's just relentless. Now, I think fans will look at their record and say, well, they've lost their last 4 games in a row. But the reason they lost those games was not because they couldn't pound the run. There were other things that stepped up, and they also played 4 really good teams. So there were outstanding opponents that they lost to. But this team, from a standpoint of BYU, is going to stress BYU in the ways that the Cougars need to improve on if they hope to get to where they want to go. And it starts with the ability to stop the run. It starts with the ability to get them off the field on 3rd and 4th down. I mean, go back to Oklahoma State. And Oklahoma State, what would have been their game-winning drive, to go up 35-31 before the Cougars came back and had that late drive to win it. That was a 17-play drive by Oklahoma State. There were 5 different opportunities to get them off the field on 3rd or 4th down, and they didn't succeed on any of those 5, and it ended up in an Oklahoma State go-ahead touchdown. Well, the Cougars right now on defense are 102nd in the nation, I think, in giving up 3rd down percentage. So if you can't get them off the field, UCF, it becomes a snowball, because now they're not only gaining yards, but they're keeping you on the field. As you stay on the field, you get more and more exhausted. As you get more exhausted, they run the ball more successfully, and everything becomes this huge snowballing issue. And so they've got to stop them on 3rd down and get them off the field. That's the key for the BYU defense here. And how do they do that? They do that with penetration. They've got to get penetration off the edge, in the middle. They've got to stop plays before they get started and get them into 3rd and long, because they throw the ball fairly well, but it's not nearly as effective as their running game on 3rd and manageable.
Trevor, BYU in at number 11 this week in the AP poll, and we have learned that along with Georgia, they are one of 2 teams in the entire country that have 2 wins against currently ranked opponents. That's it. It's just BYU and Georgia. How do you feel like BYU is being assessed from a national perspective at number 11?
I think BYU is being shown a lot of respect. I think 11 is fine for now, in part because it doesn't really matter. BYU takes care of business, and they'll make the playoff. And if BYU really takes care of business with a little bit of help, it's even possible to get a bye, first-round bye, because they might be one of the top 4 highest-ranked conference champions. Keep in mind that you don't have to be in the top 4 to get that bye. You just have to be one of the top 4 highest-ranked conference champions. So they could be ranked 8th in the nation, but get the number 4 seed and a bye. Now, the team shouldn't be thinking like this, but fans, sure, why not think about this? There are tricky games ahead, but where they're ranked now is not nearly as relevant as what they do going forward, because they've got some really tricky games ahead, including this UCF game. And if they're able to get by that, then they're at Utah. They've got Arizona State coming up, which has another power running game. And so these are the kinds of things that if BYU takes care of business at 11 right now, they're close enough to be in range of the playoff and of a potential bye. But then again, they've got a lot of work to do. And if they in order to get to that, bye, they would have to win the Big 12. And in order to do that, they got to get to the championship game, and they've got to beat probably either Iowa State or Kansas State. Most likely could be Colorado, could be Texas Tech. A lot of really good teams in order to get there. So I say this because there are a ton of scenarios. And from a fan standpoint, they're all really fun. But BYU is in position right now at number 11 for all of those dreams to come true. What the team needs to be thinking about and what they are thinking about is UCF, and that's it.
Yeah, hard not to believe BYU got a stark wake-up call with how close that Oklahoma State game was. Trevor, we enjoyed your coverage in studio at ESPN all weekend long. It was a wild weekend of college football, and we appreciate you making time for us every Monday in your busy schedule.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate you having me on.